You're watching Cable 2.
Good evening and welcome to the May 10th, 2022 Winston-Salem Forsyth County Board of Education meeting. I am Yana Kaplan, board chair, and I appreciate your attendance. And I also say good evening to our viewers on Cable 2. We have a special treat. We would like to welcome the Reagan High School String Quartet to play for us. Now that's how to open a meeting. Thank you so much. Gosh, that was just great. Set a really great tone for us. Will you please rise again as we start the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Dear God, we come to you today asking for your guidance, wisdom, and support as we begin this meeting. Help us to engage in meaningful discussion and allow us to grow closer as a team and nurture the bonds of our community for the betterment of our students. Amen. Our first order of business tonight is the agenda review. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as written?
So moved.
Second? Discussion? Okay. All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Our next order of business is our special recognitions. First, David Daggett and Griff Schuler will present the Safe and Sober T-shirt design winner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, Mrs. Superintendent, school board members, administrators, educators, family, and friends. We are in the 32nd year of the Safe Sober program. It's hard to believe. And in fact, Ms. Woodbury and Mr. Bohannon, I met them through the Safe Sober program when they were in high school. I'm not sure if I met any of the others when they were high school, but I've been around just a while. Up front, I have longtime law partner John Kuntz, more than 20 years here helping us. The Safe Sober program is founded on awareness of the dangers of drugs and alcohol, creating an environment of positive peer pressure, which is the most positive force for young people, and cultivating support from our community. Of course, a highlight of the positive peer pressure is the T-shirt design contest. And this year, we were so excited. Caitlin Bennett in the middle here with her teacher, Mr. Mark Underwood. Caitlin's a student at Parkland High School and at the Career Center. Mr. Underwood teaches digital media at the Career Center. Caitlin's a winner. We had a press conference with Madam Superintendent, the mayor, other dignitaries in our system to honor Caitlin in winning this contest. The framed T-shirt there is the first T-shirt off the press. And Caitlin asked me, she said, after tonight, can I finally have the framed T-shirt? And yes, Caitlin, you finally get it after tonight. The Safe Sober program, we had to modify because things changed during the COVID session, just like everything else has changed. So we're now at some of the proms directly. We've been at graduations the last couple years. We're now starting to hit the middle school students because research shows that if we can catch middle school students, we can improve outcomes as they go along. So later this spring, we'll be working through the YMCAs with middle school programs and distributions. And all of that, Caitlin's name in the Career Center and Parkland High School are on the back of 15,000 T-shirts that have been presented for distribution to students in our community. So big round of applause for the best and the brightest here. I could also talk all night about Mr. Underwood, but he's an example of the excellence in teaching. I know some of the other teachers out here tonight also, but just excellent, excellent educators that we have. Thank you for what you do. Yep. Does she meet the members? Or is it? Yeah. Yep.
Next, Andrew Kraft will present the 2022 All-State Band and Orchestra winners.
Good evening, distinguished board, Madam Chair, Superintendent McManus. WSFCS had 20 students audition and place into the highly selective middle and high school all-state band. 8 students placed into the middle and high school all-state jazz band, and 7 students placed into the high school all-state orchestra. Much like how North Carolina Honors Course is the highest honor for core students, which we recognized in January, this is the highest honor for band and orchestra students. And unfortunately, there is no all-state orchestra for middle school, so we're only recognizing high school today. So on to our recognitions. We'll call the names of the students who are able to be with us tonight. Jonathan Dye, West Forsyth, flute, 8th chair. Nathan Guffey, Walkertown High School, clarinet, 13th chair. Addie Higginbotham, Reagan, trombone, 9th chair. Alex Penaloza, West Forsyth, trumpet, 11th chair. Garrett Sapp, Reagan High School, clarinet, 4th chair. Ben Valier, West Forsyth, trombone, 5th chair. And for middle school, Paul Bailey, Haynes, euphonium, 1st chair. Maggie Guo, Haynes, 4th chair, flute. Karsten McCosco, Haynes, trombone, 4th chair. Gabe Sammons, Haynes, trombone, 1st chair. Ariman Shukla, Haynes, clarinet, 1st chair. And for All-State Jazz, some of these students are already up here. Alex Penaloza, West Forsyth, trumpet, 4th chair. Ben Valier, West Forsyth, trombone, 4th chair. Ben Sheldon, Reagan High School, trombone, 5th chair. Victoria Klinger, Reagan High School, piano, 1st chair. For middle school, these students are already up here. Karsten McCosco, Haynes, trombone, 1st chair. Gabe Sammons, Haynes, trombone, 2nd chair. And for All-State Orchestra, Gia Gao, Reagan High School, violin, 1. Let's give these students a warm round of applause. Jonathan, if you want to lead us this way with the handshakes. Or, we didn't practice.
Thank you. That was just great. Next is the Queen Juneteenth finalist presented by board members Shay Woodbury and Stephanie Hurt.
Good evening to Chairman Kaplan and Superintendent McManus, Thank you, first of all, for this invitation. It's an honor to be with you all this evening to introduce to you the inaugural Queen Juneteenth Scholarship Pageant. The Queen Juneteenth pageant is a cultural theatrical pageant that uplifts the heritage and scholarships of participants. It is designed to provide the necessary infrastructure to succeed in higher education. Participants are female, high school junior students in the Winston-Salem Forsyth County School System with a 2.5 GPA or higher, an interest in leadership, and a desire to serve in the community as well as attend an HBCU. The pageant is important because it advances and advocates positive identity, it teaches arts and culture, it enhances academic scholarship, it also funds a 4-year tuition, a scholarship to which a historical Black college or university can be attended. And for those who meet the minimum requirements, an award is given to the participants of 50% of their contributions raised for their college fund. Before you meet the beautiful pageant contestants, I would like to take time to recognize the phenomenal women leaders in our community, affectionately known as our Queen Council, that have overseen and mentored the young ladies you meet today. They are yours truly right here, standing beside me, Ms. Melisha Woodbury, Mayor Pro Tem Dee Dee Adams, Chief Katrina Thompson, Representative Evelyn Terry, Karen Cuthrell, Patricia Wynn, Alicia Bailey, Elder Tambila Covington, Evelyn Acree, Deanna Taylor, Robin Paul, Jada Paul, and last but certainly not least, the initiator of the Juneteenth celebration in our city, Cheryl Harry. I am your pageant director, Stephanie Hurt. Now, let's meet the beautiful women that will make up our contestant pool for the Miss Juneteenth pageant. Contestant number 1, Kiana Andrews. Kiana attends Parkland High School, and she desires to go to Fayetteville State University. I'm sorry, I forgot to bring her into practice today. That's what pageant world does. It just pulls you off the seat and makes you do stuff. But our second contestant is contestant number 2, Tiani Ingram. She is an attendant of Glenn High School, and her desire is to attend Howard. Contestant number 3 is Zuri Sweat. Zuri attends West Forsyth, and she desires to go to Howard University. Here you go. There are some contestants, unfortunately, that were not able to make it with us today, so I will let you know who they are as we go along. Contestant number 4 is Leah Furchess. Leah Furchess is also a student at Reagan High School, and she wants to attend North Carolina A&T. Contestant number 5 is Destiny Vaughn. Destiny is a student at Atkins, and she wants to attend Howard University. Contestant number 6 is Shania Carter. Shania goes to Reynolds High School and wants to attend North Carolina Central. Contestant number 7 is Cheyenne Brunson. She attends West Forsyth, and she wants to attend North Carolina A&T. Contestant number 8 is Cameron Brock. She's not with us today, but she also attends Reagan High School and wants to attend Howard University. Another student who's not with us today is Deja Whitehurst. She goes to the Middle College of Forsyth and she wants to attend Howard University. Contestant number 10 is Shanaye Simmons. Shanaye is a student at Carter G. Woodson, and she also wants to attend Howard University. Contestant number 11 is Jacqueline Hauser. Jacqueline attends Carver High School, and she wants to attend North Carolina A&T. Contestant number 12 is also not with us today. Her name is Janasia Marsh Glamp. Janasia attends Reagan High School, and she too wants to attend Howard University. And our last but not least in love is Kinley Copeland, contestant number 13. She is a student at Reagan and also wants to attend Howard University. These are your contestants for the Miss Juneteenth 2022 Scholarship Pageant.
Well, this is a great, fun board meeting.
Can I
I say
make
we
a comment?
adjourned.
Oh, go
Can we
ahead.
just adjourn?
Yeah, there you go.
Board Member Woodbury, I just want to say I'm not sure who's going to be on the selection panel, but thank you for not asking me to be. What a great group.
At this time, we will hear public comments on the agenda items. The instructions for this section were on the sheet as you signed up. Most important rule to remember is that we ask you to be kind and respectful, no cheers or jeers, during or after each speaker, and you have 3 minutes. Our first speaker is Angela Levine.
Board members and chair, thank you for the opportunity to come here and share my thoughts tonight. I recognize that tonight's vote on the Code of Character, Conduct, and Support is not about the merits of the proposed changes themselves. So I am here today to ask you to support a vote to hold public comment forums so that the merits can be fully discussed. Counter to what is being said to the media by some folks, this board and the district has done a great job in making sure that the team that worked on the code was comprised of all the relevant stakeholders, especially parents. Thank you for making sure the parents were involved in the conversation and could provide valuable input as improvements to the code were being discussed. The transparency of this group's work is on display tonight, and this approach of parent engagement and problem solving is exactly the right approach and what we need to continue to have going forward. Holding public comment forums is so very important. It continues to provide transparency of process and shows this board's dedication to listening to and considering what parents think about the proposed changes. By voting for holding the forums, I believe you will gain beneficial insights from hearing parent perspectives and be more fully informed as you prepare to vote on the code later this month. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Zoe Brokenborough.
Good evening, board members and Superintendent McManus. My name is Zoe Brokenborough. I graduated from Reynolds High School in 2020, and I'm a rising junior at UNC Chapel Hill. I'm here tonight in support of the new Code of Conduct. I'm very happy to see that Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools has realized that harsh disciplinary measures have a negative impact on students in general, but especially on Black and Latinx students. In our school system, Black students are 5.6 times more likely to get suspended than white students, even though studies have shown that Black and white students misbehave at similar rates. Students that are suspended are more likely to end up in the juvenile court system, and thus contributing to the school-to-prison pipeline. I support incorporating restorative practices into the Code of Conduct. This will improve relationships among students and teachers, reduce disciplinary problems, and build community. I realize that changing from a punitive to a restorative mindset represents a paradigm shift, but it's a shift that is needed to make our schools safer and better for all students. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, Rhonda Mays.
Good evening, Chairwoman Kaplan, excuse me.
Good evening.
The board and Superintendent McManus. I am here speaking in support of the character code change. And the reason I'm speaking in support of it is that, as the speaker before me stated, it is a way of helping others to be more responsive and responsible for addressing concerns and issues that are taking place in our buildings, in our schools. And I like the fact that we are going to, it's gonna not just be something just for our students, but it's a whole mind shift. It's gonna be something that adults are gonna have to model as well as our parents. It's a community effort to address concerns that arise in the district, and not just saying it's just the student. It's going to be a way to support our students and finding other ways to handle different things that are taking place. We're going to be more supportive and restorative. It's not going to be discipline to harm, but to help, to address things. And also, I keep hearing rumors about, well, no one's going to be suspended. No one said that. But we're going to have a more standardized way of addressing situations. And not just if you go to a school on one side of town and you are a certain race or from a certain culture, you're going to be handled this way with that situation. But if you're on this side of town, it's a whole different way. That's not equitable. We need to make certain that we are supporting our students as well as supporting each other in our education system here in Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools. And we can do it when we work together and when we are all on the same playing field and we all have the same expectations. And we also take in consideration mitigating circumstances. And the bottom line is we want to make certain that we're supporting our students so that when they leave us, they have other tools that they can use in order to function outside in the world as a whole. Thank you for your time, and I am looking forward to this change for our district, and I am looking forward to us having a more cohesive way of addressing concerns and issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Jabbar.
Good evening, Board Chair Kaplan, distinguished
evening.
Board, Superintendent McManus. As some of you know, I volunteer in the schools, and I get a chance sometime to be a lunch buddy. And one of the things I've noticed as I've sat with the kids is I watch some of the things they have on their plate. And I'm really concerned that some of the stuff I see is not nutritional. And I would hope and pray that this board takes a deeper dive into looking at what our kids are being served. And I want to take one step further to bring this information to you as a school board, because I think the more information and knowledge you have as a board, I think you're able to operate more efficiently. The company that we presently have as a vendor, Chatwell, in 2015, in the District of Columbia, they settled for $19 million on a lawsuit around the fact, and I'll share with you what the Attorney General said. He said, Chatwell has quite reasonably acknowledged and addressed mistakes it made in administrating the contract to provide food and food services to DCPS. Attorney General Carl Racine said in a statement, it is important to ensure for the fulfilling their obligations under the contract, and these settlements does just that. So what I want to share with you as a board today, I know some things come across you got a lot of stuff coming across your plate, but there's a lot of money that goes out to contractors. I think that this board needs to be more informed as to who we're partnering with and where the money is going and how it's going. So I hope that you take time and investigate some of the people that we're bringing on to do services for this district, because this statement here to me says that we are operating with a company who has been sued in the past. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Next, Sabrina Kuhn-Godfrey.
Good evening, Chair Kaplan, members of the board, Superintendent McManus. I am speaking tonight on behalf of the Code of Conduct and the importance of voting to move forward in the public information sessions. As a member of the Parent Caregiver Focus Group, I commend the district on all the voices that they have included in working on the code. They have made sure to include teachers, parents, students, and student services, as well as many others. Continuing this involvement with community sessions shows a commitment that aligns with the overall goals of the Code of Character and Conduct. So please vote in favor for the community sessions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Katie Grote.
Hi, good evening.
Hi.
Chair Kaplan, the board, and Superintendent McManus. My name is Katie Grody, and I'm a mother of two and a child therapist here working with kids in 2 schools in our district. I'm here tonight to voice my support to hold forums for the public comment on the proposed Code of Character, Conduct, and Support. I really appreciate that throughout the drafting of this new code, the district collaborated and consulted with teachers, parents, students, and community members. As a child therapist and a mom, I am most grateful that the proposed code looks at the whole child and seeks to foster an environment of mutual respect, accountability, connectedness, and equity. I also want to voice my support for the contract with Crossnor and the Center of Trauma Resilient Communities. I believe both of these issues go hand in hand, the code and the trauma contract. Trauma-informed practices are crucial if we want to serve all our kids and create an environment that supports learning for all. There's a lot more work that needs to be done in really shifting the culture of our schools, but I believe we're headed in the right direction. A focus on trauma-informed care and this new code have the potential to significantly raise the bar for everyone in our schools. Again, I welcome and appreciate the opportunity to further engage with the code at the public forums, and I urge you to support the contract with Crossnor. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Yana Quinas. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing it correctly.
Good evening. My name is Yanawi Quinones. I'm here to support the new Student Code of Character, Conduct, and Support. One reason is because of that last keyword, support. From being able to take part in the opportunity with the meetings that involved teachers and school staff, I understood that as a significant goal of the draft. One personal connection I have made with this draft deals with my role supporting students as an interventionist. There are protocols outlined for my role for providing academic support and interventions that guide me and have made an impact on my students. I believe this code will have the same impact on conduct because it's more than the old outline of consequences. It includes strategies to promote positive behavior and prevent disengagement. It provides a tiered system to support students socially and emotionally. Most importantly, it presents a mindset, which has been mentioned multiple times already, I know, but a different mindset on behavior that views those unwanted behaviors as teachable skills. When we want students to improve academically, we target the skills that they need. The code has the potential to do the same for behaviors. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Samantha Fitzgerald.
Good evening.
Hi.
Board Chair Kaplan, Ms. McManus, and the board members. My name is Samantha Fitzgerald, and I serve as the assistant principal at Louisville Elementary. And I'm coming to you on behalf as an educator, as a behavior support past, and as a parent. And I urge you to take this vote in support for the Code of Conduct. In my years of teaching and as behavior support, I have seen our kids be pushed through these cracks where they are not given the support. We are educators, and I feel like sometimes those students who have the behavioral struggles aren't given those supports. That last sentence, just like the speaker before me, supports. We support students academically every single day. We give them what they need to be successful, but when they are not demonstrating the behaviors that we want to see, we punish them and we're punitive. And how do we expect to raise productive citizens in our society if we are not giving them the tools to do that in the school setting? Parents working together, this is a huge opportunity for us to bring in and work as a whole, see that we're all together to be best supporting them. And when we see these students struggling, going to the table together to find a solution to help them. We are seeing so many, we know that there's academic gaps now, even farther from our pandemic. But what about the social emotional pieces of our kids? Because now in elementary school, they don't know how to work together. They've been isolated behind a screen to no fault of anyone's in that regard. It is what it is. But now we've got to come together and teach them these skills. As a parent, I have 3 children. They're all different, every single one of them, and I love them dearly, but they all have their certain struggles. But my oldest, as an educator, and I've shared some of this with you before, as an educator and former support for behavior, I have a child who the system has failed. He is now being homeschooled in middle school because he cannot get the support. He's already had at 7th grade that label as that bad kid. And that will never go away. To see your child struggle as an educator, and I know what is best, not be successful is the most heart-wrenching thing that I've ever had to deal with. So I urge you to take this and help our kids whose parents aren't lucky and can't fight or don't know what supports are out there. And I'm struggling being educated in this realm. How do we support our other parents? Because they're giving us their very best every single day. We've got to give them the support too and help our kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Jenny Easter.
Good evening. I came to speak about nutrition tonight, and I kind of wanted to second what Mr. Jabbar said. I think we really need to look into Chartwell and maybe things that have changed along the lines of when COVID came about, because seeing some of the breakfasts and the lunch that come back into our classrooms is kind of heartbreaking. And although I know, because I talk to her almost every day, our cafeteria manager tries her hardest to give them the best with what we have, They have somehow put stipulations on what is okay, because I remember like 2 or 3 years ago, well, before COVID, she would make like some really good homemade dishes. And I always asked her, like the past 2 years, when are you gonna have that pimento cheese sandwich? And, you know, all these different things that I knew she was like so good at cooking, and her whole staff was good at preparing for these children. And she's like, I'm not allowed to do that. I'm not allowed to, Chartwell doesn't allow that. And so I don't know what the policies are for Chartwell, but I have to agree with Mr. Jabbar that that is something that I think you guys need to really look into, especially if we're gonna consider continuing the contract with them, because not only do our children need all the social care in the world right now, they need nutrition, and they need to grow their bodies as they're growing their brains and their social skills. So that's really what I wanted to come and talk to you about, is really consider that, because I know that's going to be talked about tonight, but I don't know if the contract is really what's going to be discussed. But before we decide or vote on that, please look into some things like that, because we really need some good, healthy food. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next order of business is the superintendent's update.
Thank you. So first slide, the last time I was here, we were extending our summer school enrollment, and that was good because now we are up to 3,300 students enrolled. We have lots more room, and so we have now extended to May 17th. So we're going to continue to work with our schools to get information out to families. You can see on this slide all of the different program opportunities that are available to our students. And so again, we have room. You know, last year our summer program, we had 7,000 students approximately. So we'd love to see this number increase. So we're going to continue to get word out to our families. Next, testing is about to begin. Our testing, our end of year testing begins on May 26th to June 9th, and there's more information about this on our website. We start graduations this week. Early and middle college ceremonies are on May 12th, so congratulations to those graduates. This is the exciting season for us with our students walking across the stage, so we'll be there this week. And also, tomorrow, May 11th, is National School Nurse Day, and we want to recognize all of our nurses who serve our schools. They have always been instrumental into the health of our students, and the last 2 years that has been even increased. And so thank you to all of those that are serving as school nurses. Yep. A beautiful future, by the way, would be one per school. That's just out there, putting it in the universe. Congratulations to our core award winners. This was last Thursday evening. We had a great time, and on this slide you will see our winners. And so many of our board members were there, many staff, many teachers, and it was a full house. I think we had 400 and close to 500 people? 600. 600 people were in attendance. So congratulations not only to this group of winners, but to all the finalists who were there. We have amazing staff and employees throughout this district. So thank you.
Thank you. Our next order of business is discussion items. Dr. Corliss Thompson-Drew will present the contract with Cross North Schools and Children's Home Center for Trauma Resilient Communities.
It's a mouthful. It is a mouthful.
That was a mouthful.
Right. So good evening, board and Superintendent McManus, and it's Mental Health Awareness Month, so I have a plug for that. It's so appropriate to be talking about that. With me this evening, I have Beatrice Vitas, who is the co-founder and senior director for the center, and Marnie Eisner, who is the director of business development. Okay? So the Center for Trauma Resilient Communities is an organization through Cross North Schools. It helps organizations and communities embed and embody the science of trauma resilience. And as you can see there, the mission really is to help people understand what trauma is, right? The science of trauma, the impact on the body and the mind, emotional functioning. making sure we're working with leaders to build a trauma-informed and trauma-responsive culture. A lot of conversation this evening about our code of conduct and being restorative. How do we understand what's happening with folks? Making sure we have workforce development by helping us to build resilience to chronic stress and the exposure to secondary trauma. And also that we're building the capacity, right? So it's not just teaching people this work and how do we embed? We make sure we have capacity so that the work can continue and it can be sustaining. The contract will cover a couple things. One is the actual content training for the model itself. It's a 3-day training that includes 8 modules that focuses on the different aspects of the trauma resilience community model. Participants become familiarized with the trauma-informed collaboration and and coordinations in terms of implementing the model. Participants are onboarded to the model so they can implement it across a system of care. One of the things that I appreciate about this model, and I have been through the content training as well as train-the-trainer, and I've been to a lot of trauma-resistant training and trauma-resilient training. This really looks at organizations, right, and systems and across systems. Is very much involved in that, and the different things that we do with systems and how it impacts the work of people in the systems. Training materials are provided, printed documents, activity and supplies and those things. The second part of the contract will cover the train-the-trainer certification, and that's where we're building capacity. That is also a 3-day certification training, continuing with formalizing and standardizing the content. There's printed materials and ongoing implementation support. I've often seen implementation support, but nothing like is included here with this. There are also opportunities for in-person model boosters. Again, I've attended the content training, as had several members from the school system. We have 2 schools that are currently working with the center, Brunson Elementary in Reynolds, and that's why Bee is here. She's down on one of her, I think, model booster sessions, so they're working with her. The train-the-trainer work is also very important, and it was very exciting to be part of that with the community members and other school district employees, and to really get immersed in what this means. The angle for this is that, you know, we can't just go and do the work. We have to really examine ourselves. Where are we in terms of understanding our own trauma, our own background, and our experiences, and how that impacts our behavior and our perceptions, and then being able to take that out and train folks around that. So the total cost of this contract is $116,270, and that includes an administrative fee, as you can see there. So I've broken this down in terms of the different activities. The 3-day content training, there's a trainer cost, total cost of $22,500, travel and lodging, $6,000, and then training materials and supplies of $1,200. And then the 3-day train-the-trainer is, again, the $250 per day for 3 trainers, total cost of $22,500, travel and lodging, $6,000, training materials and supplies, $600, manuals for everyone that attends, $2,400, and a facilitation kit of $6,000. In addition, once they've gone through the train-the-trainer, there's consultation. So there's consultation on Zoom, 12 hours, total cost of $3,000. There's also Zoom coaching and training support of another 24 hours, and that's $6,000. Implementation planning, 6 hours, $1,500. So you're not left alone. There's actual support for how do you implement. Matter of fact, I think it's tomorrow. We have our implementation planning for those of us that attended the train of trainer. Model boosters are 4 of those, again, for a total cost of $2,000, and then the travel and lodging for when they come and do those activities around model boosters at those of $8,000. Any question? Yes, Ms. Motsinger.
First, thank you. I'm really excited about trying to do something with this in our district. I was wondering how many participants are going to be in the overall training, and how many train the trainers? How many trainers are we expecting to train?
Well, I think that depends on what we do, and I don't know if there's a cap is there a cap B for the number of trainers? I know we had 25 or so at the last one.
So ideally, what we want to do, and I'm gonna, can everybody hear me?
No.
Do you want to come up? Do you want to come up to the podium?
Oh, the podium right there, I guess. You can go to the podium, whichever where.
Either way.
Okay.
Although I work in a lot of school districts all over the country. So what we want to do next is actually work with each of the school districts to identify the champions in each of the schools that we can identify. So we'll work with the capacity that you have, but ideally we want representatives for every single one of your schools.
So you want a trainer for each school?
So at least 2 or 3 per school.
Okay, so with 80 schools, you're talking about, right?
And so far, even before this project has come to your presence, we actually have trained 60 to 65 people already in the district.
Okay.
And many of them are looking forward to becoming trainers. So I feel like we're really way into the creation of a trainer manual.
So I'm just trying to understand, the participants, the 60 already, they went through the first initial 3-day.
Yes, ma'am.
And then some of those will go on to become trainers.
Absolutely.
And is the goal of the 2 to 3 per school to be people who are working in the schools, or is it 2 to 3 will go on to become trainers?
It's actually a combination of both. So what we want to do is create an exchange and collaborative approach so that across the board you have people who can train, maybe elementary trainers can train middle school, or middle school can come to trainers. Okay. So the idea is to really maximize the number of trainers that you have in the district, become experts in the content, and then work across the district.
So is the goal mostly, so for example, when you say 60 people have already been through the basic training, is the goal for the people who go through the training to become trainers? So is it really a 2-part, or is it broken down into, I just want to get the training, I don't want to be a trainer, or is the hopeful outcome people will be moved enough that they will become trainers?
So we have a couple of outcomes in mind. One of them is to train leaders who will be supporting the movement and the work, right? Implementing the science of trauma and resilience. We also want to identify champions who will do a lot of embedding practices related to implementation. And then we also have trainers who will be actually conducting training themselves.
And how many people in our district are we hoping are going to be part of this cohort?
Well, I know one of the things we've talked about is having initial training with our student services. And that's about, I don't know that all of them will become trainers, but we have about 250 student services. And actually, I think with the series of training we had in the fall, there were at least, I'm thinking roughly maybe 30 or 40 of them that already had the 3-day training. So that's one approach that we're going to do to have that embedded. But we certainly would welcome other people. We've had teachers that have attended the training as well.
Okay, so the goal is this all student support to go through this.
Right.
And then for other people in the district who really want to get more training, they're also welcome under this contract.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And again, you know, it's not everybody might be inclined to be a trainer, but I think certainly having the initial training and being familiar with the content and being messenger, so to speak,
Right,
that can
a
move
champion
forward
of the work.
Exactly, right.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And I'm really excited about making sure this gets out to our staff so that they're aware it's taking place, because there's not a classroom in our district where there is not children impacted by trauma.
And what I would say about this too, yes, children are impacted by trauma. But
and adults.
Right. Yes. So importantly, we have to understand, you know, this conversation about mind shift, right? That it is really about people looking within, where they are, who they are, and how I respond and relate to others. There's a lot of stuff out there where we do things to kids, but this is really about all of us in totality as a system working in, you know, in a certain way as well.
That's very exciting.
And just to give you an example, I had a conversation today. We had a prior grant that allowed us to work with some of your schools already. And just to give you an example of how exciting this work is, today I met with Brunson Elementary, where we have some champions already training this work.
And so today we met about how do we translate that to a practice for the teachers, lesson plans for the students, and also informational sessions or psychoeducation sessions for parents. So it's a multi-layer approach. Now that work, I'm going to be consulting and leading the consultation, but it is actually the educators. We had 15 people who signed up to actually say, what do we do next? How do we bring it to the classroom? How do we bring it to teachers? And we also have some parents in the community who have been trained on this model, and they're now also working on trying to bring that piece to the family piece as well in community. So
Well,
it's a
and again, I
multi-tiered.
love the whole idea of a trauma-resilient community, because ultimately, that's the way that real change can happen, is if it happens on a community level. So, thank you.
Board Member Bohannon?
Thank you. So, Dr. Thompson-Drew, this is just kind of brass tacks. So for the $116,000, are there a certain amount of people that can be trained with that amount? Like, does that get us a certain amount of people, or is it just unlimited? Because I'm still a little confused about
Okay.
that.
So, B, is there a cap on the number of people that you would train in the session? Now, the 3-day training that I attended, I think there were like upwards of 75 people there. So I think that's what you're asking, right? What is the capacity at a particular training?
Right.
Yeah, and hi, I'm Marnie Eisner. I'm with the Center for Trauma Resilient Communities. And so as we priced this particular proposal out, we were thinking of caps, 100 at most for the 3-day. Obviously for Train the Trainer, it would be a subset of that group. But one thing I wanted to explain, because I think it's so important as you all consider this proposal, is we're really trying to leverage dollars across the community. KP Reynolds Trust has now funded for the second time over $300,000 worth of training and activities throughout the community with partner organizations that work with children and families. And we also have the grant from the county as part of the mental health block grant, which is how we're working with Brunson and Reynolds, and also how Crossnor is providing mental health services in 6 different schools. So this is one important piece of really a very large community effort. So I just wanted you to know that this decision is not in isolation of a lot of other people looking at this and trying to fund different pieces.
Right, and that's really
that
what
help?
I was getting at, is because ultimately, particularly given the fact that what I'm hearing is that we have long-term goals relative to this work. So I was just trying to understand how what we're doing right now fits into the long-term kind of what we're planning to do.
And I also want to, the way that our model works is that, and Dr. Carles already spoke about building capacity. So our goal is for the district to eventually fire us so that you can do the work yourself.
Yeah.
So what we're looking at is probably on the next 5 years, if you think about having, let's say, anywhere between 75 to 100 people who are experts in content and consultation, then that wave gets the next school ready. Because we have to think about a couple of things. One is, which of the schools that in your district, what do we have, something like 80, how many schools do we
In
have?
total?
In total?
81.
Like 81 schools, right? So that could be a domino effect. So what are the schools that are ready for this work and that have capacity to build this work, and then we build the expertise there. And then from there, those experts then train the rest of your system. So that in the next 5 years, we have a plan to ideally, and I'm gonna name it to the universe right now, is that in the next 5 to 7 years, every single school will be trained, and perhaps not by the center, but the experts that we're creating in the system.
And again, because it's not done in isolation, KP Reynolds Trust has prioritized the entire community becoming trauma resilient. So they're working with organizations in the restorative justice space, homelessness and housing, food insecurity. So it's, you're a big piece of that entire community puzzle.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank
I'm going
you.
to speak into the universe, a psychologist for every school. Thank you.
Ditto to that.
Thank you. Next, Lauren Richards, our Chief Operations Officer, will give us the Child Nutrition Program update for 2022-2023 school year.
Good evening, Board Chair, Board members, and Superintendent McManus.
All right, so I've got a couple different items to talk with you about this evening related to the child nutrition program. So the first one is our summer meal program. Every year we extend our school program to go into the summer months to support our summer school programs, as well as our students that are away participating in other activities and sitting at home. So these meals are free to all students, and the great thing about the summer program is they are free to all students 18 years of age and younger, down to birth. And you do not have to be a school system student in order to participate. So if you are visiting friends or cousins or other people throughout the county, the state, and even the nation, you can access these free meals, which is really cool. We are going to be putting information up on the district website June 1st that families can access to show them the locations throughout the county where these meals will be offered. There is also a text option for families that will work as well. The text food to 877-877. It will give them information about locations near them where they can access that food as well. So this summer we have 27 open sites. Open sites are where anybody can walk into our schools and receive those meals. And we have 21 mobile meal sites. We started this a few years before we shut down for the pandemic. We continued it through the pandemic, and it's been very successful partnering with a lot of different community agencies and even neighborhoods to be able to take the meals directly to those homes where students can come out and have access to those meals. The dates for that program are June 20th through August 11th. There are 3 schools that will serve outside of those dates, a little bit of an extended time for some additional programs that are happening in those buildings to provide support in those areas. The meal times are listed here for you. All of these sites will have breakfast and lunch each day. And so along with the summer meal program comes the need to extend the food service management contract from our regular school year. And so this is a USDA requirement when you have a food service management contract, because the summer meal program is a separate program from the National School Lunch and School Breakfast program that we operate during the school year. And so each year around this time, we come to you to present an addendum to that contract to extend it into June, July, and August to offer this program. And usually, as we've included mobile meals, the summer program has come with a slightly different cost than the school year, because those meals require items to be prepackaged, transported out into the community. This year we are also experiencing extreme supply shortages and having to substitute a lot of different items that we would not typically have to do, and we're seeing some increased cost there. And so that is the reason to see the increase here from last summer's cost. Any questions on the summer meal program or the addendum before I move into some programming for the 22-23 school year?
Any questions? Okay.
All right, so for the 21-22 school year, just as a reminder, the Child Nutrition Program is a USDA federally funded program that comes with many rules and regulations that stipulate what we can do and how we can do it for the meal program. During the pandemic, when we shut down in March of 2020, one of the great things that the USDA program did was they opened up a number of waivers to reduce barriers for school districts across the country to continue to provide meals to students while they weren't in our schools for several months. Some of those waivers included making adjustments to the meal pattern requirements, which speaks to sodium requirements, fruit offerings, vegetable offerings, things of that nature. But the biggest one was that meals became free for all students everywhere. And so there were no more free and reduced meal applications and having to apply. They were just free. And so that has extended and continued into the 21-22 school year. However, as of June 30th, 2022, all of those USDA meal waivers end, and it is not looking promising that there is going to be an extension. There has been a bill introduced on the House floor. I don't have that one listed here, but I believe it's House Bill 6618, and Senate Bill 3979, which is the Support Students Not Red Tape Act, to try to extend specifically the meal waiver to allow all meals to be free for all students into the 22-23 school year.
They're both in introductory phases and in committees at this time. We don't really know anything else, but we will continue to track those to see if anything changes before we start school. The reason I say all of that is because this means that for the fall of 22-23, all school programs, meal programs, will have to revert back to the process of families qualifying via an event or household income to be able to receive a free or reduced meal status. Many school districts across the nation are looking at increasing their meal prices this year because of food supply demand, shortages on food, labor wages increasing. We have a healthy fund balance in child nutrition, which for many years has allowed us not to increase that cost to our families. And in talking with our Chartwell's partners, I do not believe, and believe that you all would support increasing those costs to our family for the fall with everything else that is taking place. And so we will continue to monitor into the new school year what these costs look like with increased food costs and with the increased labor costs as well to monitor and sustain the program to support our families. And so I listed here mainly for our families at home what the meal rates will be in the fall so that they have an idea of what that will look like because they haven't seen them in a couple of years. So some of the things that our families at home need to know to get ready for back to school is to go ahead and fill out the free and reduced application now. We have actually been sharing this message all throughout this school year because there are benefits that come along with that free or reduced meal status separate from receiving the meals for free in a normal school year. Those things include potentially a reduction on band uniforms, a reduction in fees on driver's ed services, amongst many other things. One of the other pieces that the USDA implemented during the pandemic was what was called PEBT, or Pandemic EBT, and any family that had one of the household applications on file and qualified for free or reduced got benefits at home. I think I missed that on one of my previous slides. Got benefits on a card at home while they were not in school to go to grocery stores and purchase food to make sure that they were able to still get fed during their at-home school day. And so we've been encouraging those applications. But we are going to be looking right now to work with our communications team to do a big push to families to make sure that they fill out these applications. And you may be asking, why is it so important right now in May and June? But the reason is because that application status extends into the first 30 days of school for the next school year. And so that application does not impact any free meals to any households right now if you get declined. But if you fill out the application now and your household qualifies, for the first 30 days when you return to school, that's a very busy time, you do not have to worry and rush to get that application completed and worry about having to pay for meals. And then you have that 30-day window to complete a new application for that school year. This application is available online. That was another process that the department started while we were shut down. We were able to get that online and going. And so the process is very, very quick. If you know your student's school number, ID number, their school name, and their information and your household income, you can complete that in just a few minutes. So I really do want to extend that to our families to make sure they complete that if they believe that they're in need. There's nothing wrong with applying and getting declined. And if something changes in a household, you can apply anytime throughout the year whenever there is a change. So that leads me into a little bit of a caveat in going back to the regular programming of school meals, and that is the community eligibility provision. So this provision was introduced by the USDA to the state of North Carolina for the school year of 2015-16. At that time, we had about 25 schools, I believe it was, 24 or 25, that qualified. And so there is a specific data set that gets used that we are obligated to complete on April 1st of every year and submit to the state to publish, and then to compute any schools that may be eligible for this provision. What this provision does is, based on this data set formula, it basically extends the free meal benefit to a school and a school building instead of the individual child. And so this year, we have 48 schools that qualify to be a CEP school. You can qualify a school individually, and you can also qualify schools in groups. We have found over the last few years pre-COVID that being able to qualify them in a group will extend this offering to more schools that wouldn't qualify individually. And pre-pandemic, we were at 39 schools. And so you can see that the data has increased significantly enough that there are now 48 schools that will all qualify for free meals 100% within our district. So if you are in one of these schools, you do not need to fill out that application, but you can still fill it out if you'd like to receive some of the other eligible features that go along with that. But I am glad to see that we have these 48 schools, but I am disappointed that the waiver is not being extended to our families. So hopefully we will get plenty of information out to them so that they can do what they need to and hopefully qualify if that is what their family truly needs. Any questions about next year's programming and CEP schools?
Board Member Bohannon.
Thank you. So this question is a little bit just more general about what, you talked a little bit earlier about we are kind of governed by the USDA relative to what we can do and what we can't do relative to the meals. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because I know that for me personally, when you talk to students in schools, especially about food, you always get feedback about the quality of food and what you can and cannot serve. And so if you could just kind of talk a little bit about that and how that works, I think that'd be good.
Absolutely. So in 2010, a significant number of new updates came to school districts operating the meal program from the USDA in the hopes to be able to standardize nutritious meals for students. There were a number of dietary guidelines that were established through that process, and they all came in kind of in a phased-in approach with sodium reductions, calorie-specific counts. And then it also goes into the number of bread grains you can serve in a week, the number of fresh fruits and vegetables that you have to serve. Within the vegetables, there's certain subgroups that you have to offer throughout the week, a half a cup of legumes, a half a cup of green vegetables, leafy greens, red, orange vegetables. So it is pretty intense. And so there is a dietitian on staff that works to develop those menus and meet those requirements, and the food manufacturers work alongside the USDA and school districts to try to make products that students will enjoy, that taste or flavorful, but also meet those standards. The sodium reduction, I would say, has probably been one of the most stringent and continues to get even more stringent. We actually received information last week about participating in a survey for recommended dietary guidelines for future planning. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that as well. So there are many restrictions, but manufacturers and people that develop recipes have gotten pretty creative in ways of trying to create recipes that support students. There was a comment made earlier this evening around homemade items. And so I would like to address that. Just those are great items. Those are standardized recipes that meet those standards that apparently kids enjoy, which is great to hear. But right now, there are a number of supply shortages. Board Member Crowley had asked me a few weeks ago about compostable trays that we had converted to a few years ago district-wide. And we are trying to get those, but some weeks they're not available. And so we have to purchase something different. And then next week, the compostable trays are back, so we purchase those. And so we have to hop around quite a bit right now just to be able to have the tray to serve the meals on. That department is also 140 staff members short throughout the district for an entire team of 525, and that does not include the 10 Chartwell's employees. And so asking that staff right now in these times to prepare some of those homemade meals is complicated. And so trying to find that balance between beneficial items to the students, items that the students enjoy, and also trying to be respectful to the staff's time and ability as well.
And so my last question is, so those restrictions, those would be applied to us no matter no matter who the actual contractor was, whether it was Chartwell's or Aramark or whoever, we would still be required to adhere to those requirements.
Yes, even if we were a self-op and did not have a food service management contractor, we would be obligated to follow those same standards and have no support in developing those recipes and meeting those standards.
And I'm sorry, I said that was my last one, but I'm sorry about that.
No worries.
Does our contract, our food service kind of contract, how often does that come back up for renewal?
So when that contract goes out, it is a one-year contract with up to a 4-year renewal for a total of 5 years.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
And that is mandated also by the USDA.
Any other questions? Board Member Woodbury?
Thank you. I am not as sophisticated as Board Member Bohannon. I liked his questions. And I guess I just wanted to kind of extend his questions around some of the things that we've heard tonight from the community. And really, this may be more for the superintendent, Lauren, than you, to kind of give us some feedback around what was discussed around some concerns with chart wheels, what other alternatives, you know, school districts across this state using. I don't want to, you know, wave a red flag with chart wheels, but I do want to, with all due diligence as a board, address the concerns from the community so that we all feel like we're giving our children and staff best options for nutrition. So I don't know where we are with the cycle of the contract with chart wheels, but I think maybe if the board can get some update, then we can share more information with the community. Thank you.
Absolutely. We can get you that information.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Next, Dr. Lionel Cato, Chief Officer of Learning Supports, will present the new Student Code of Character, Conduct, and Support draft.
Good evening, board members and Superintendent McManus. Appreciate the time this evening to share with you all and to share with our community on the new Code of Character, Conduct, and Support work that's been going on for about a year now in our district. Been quite honored to be a part of the work and to be able to work with over 300 different stakeholders across our county in developing the draft that will be presented to the public here very shortly. There are some members of the group of people, of those 300 stakeholders here tonight. I wanted them to stand because they came here tonight to hear the comments and to be supportive of the work. I want them to stand and just be recognized. This is just a sliver of the 300 and some odd stakeholders that helped us engage in this work. Their teachers, their parents, their community members, their triad restorative justice, they're all walks of life in our community, and we appreciate their support during the course of this time. Dr. Effie McMillan, our Executive Director of Equity, is here as well. She's been very integral to this work and will present a portion here shortly. This is a great opportunity for our district, as you have heard, and so I'm going to get out the way. I'm going to let Dr. McMillan share some pieces with you, and then I will come back and share some others. Dr. McMillan.
All right. Good evening, Chairwoman Kaplan, board members, Superintendent McManus. And so, as Dr. Cato said, we embarked on this work April last year. So it's been going for quite some time. During phase 1 of the process, we did a deep data dive, which consisted of looking at and analyzing data for about 3 years. What was found in that data was that we definitely have a problem with the use and overuse of exclusionary punishment, which disproportionately impacts students of color and students with disabilities. As one of our speakers, I think her name was Zoe, one of our graduates of Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools, highlighted some data. I just want to bring those points back to the forefront. Our data shows, and this is not new data, but African American children are 5 times more likely to be suspended from our schools. African American students with a disability are about 2 times more likely to be suspended than a student who does not have a disability. And African American children with a disability are 3 times more likely to be suspended than other students with a disability. And so those are some issues, as speakers came forward, that we definitely need to address in a more comprehensive way.
As we continue to delve into our data and looking at our previous code, we know that research shows that overuse of any exclusionary punishment for students contributes to high dropout rates, great loss of instructional time. We can't raise achievement and have academic success for all of our students if they are not in our classrooms. Skipping school, lower attendance rates, time, as my mother used to say, idle time, unsupervised time during school hours where they're not in a building that's welcoming and safe and in a place where they can engage in learning with their teachers and their peers, and can lead to students being funneled into the juvenile justice system. So as districts embark on this work and they look at policies, practices, and their codes, oftentimes what are found are these issues. And as we have engaged in this work, we have found many of the same ones, that it's outdated, not user-friendly, doesn't look at children or adults holistically in terms of academic, social, and emotional development. And there are elements or critical sections to codes that are oftentimes not present, such as rights and responsibilities of all stakeholders, restorative interventions, universal classroom strategies, and how to get help, like how to ask for help, and then how to help and support others. There we go. So, based on the code that is being proposed and being proposed to be voted to go out for public comment from feedback beyond the stakeholders who have spent countless hours and given so much of their time, is that we want through this new code, our aims are to have these decreases. Disciplinary responses that result in loss of instructional time, disproportional application of disciplinary responses, rates of recidivism, and that's the reduced likelihood that students will continue to repeat unwanted behaviors in our schools, and to remove that discretionary language for behaviors that leads to disproportionality as well. We also are aiming through this code to standardize promotion and prevention classroom practices so that this is something that's consistent across the entire district. We have a transit student population, and so as they move from one school to another, it's important that we have some consistency in terms of strategies that everybody is using and putting into place. We want to make sure and increase that there's fair and accountable disciplinary policies and practices, restorative interventions. As one of the speakers said earlier, we want it to be more than just punitive, but you know, growing up, I know I was not perfect, and I still am not perfect. And not only did I have to learn academically, but there were behaviors that I exhibited as a youngster that was not pleasing in my parents' sight, my community sight, or the school site. And if it had not been for teachers, school leaders, and community, parents that all wrapped around me and helped me to learn those skills that would promote me to get to the place I am today, I wouldn't be standing here. So I know how beneficial it is personally. We also know that our data shows that about 38% of our kids don't have a sense of belonging. They don't feel like they belong in our schools. And to me, that's very problematic. And so we want our schools to be those spaces, and that perception of every single one of our schools to be places that are welcoming, they're safe, they're inclusive to every single student and every single family that we serve, so that we can truly give them the best education that they can possibly receive. And so with that, one last thing is that this code really provides us with a North Star to get to those things that I just shared with you in terms of what we want to decrease and the things that we want to increase. And as Dr. Cato mentioned before I turned it over to him for him to go into more specifics, is that this truly has been an inclusive process. It's been an inclusive process since the very beginning. And we've had a number of stakeholders that, like I said before, have given of their time every month to be on calls, to give like a number of things, and we really appreciate those that are here in the audience, those that are listening, and those that couldn't be here tonight, but have been truly instrumental to the work that has happened over this past year. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Cato.
Thank you, Dr. McMillan. And so what we have learned through our processes with our community stakeholders are that there are some very key components to every code that research says need to be part of a code. And so those are listed here in the table of contents. I'm not going to read all of those to you, but we're going to go into a few of those this evening to kind of highlight the different parts of the code in the interest of time. The introduction of the code houses our core concepts and core beliefs, which lay the foundation of the code and the work that we're trying to do here in the district. So all of these pieces are critically important, but again, we want to highlight just a few of those areas tonight. And so we're familiar with our district's core beliefs. Those are included in the introduction. And what we may not be as familiar with are core concepts that have come out of this code work that are embodied throughout the code. We want our students to have an accountable and restorative approach. We want our adults to have an accountable and restorative approach to student discipline and building character. The new code is steeped in the multi-tier systems of support, MTSS, which you've all heard a lot about over the course of the past several months. Social emotional learning, life learning and life competencies are all a part of the code. Character and conduct are a part of the code. It's not just about discipline, it's about building character. Culturally responsive practices and trauma-sensitive practices are all a part of the code. Another key part of the code are the rights and responsibilities that are outlined throughout the code. The code outlines rights and responsibilities for all students, for parent caregivers, and for staff members. The articulation of rights and responsibilities for students, parents, and caregivers and staff brings clarity to the rights and responsibilities that come along with them. So there's an accountability piece there for us all to hold one another accountable for each other's rights and be responsible to one another and within the school community. A major component of this code, which is going to be very helpful to teachers, is the Universal Pre-K Promotion Prevention Classroom Strategies. These are strategies that will be implemented across every classroom in the district, that every student will have access to, every teacher will have access to, that support academic engagement and achievement. And as stated in the title there, will prevent a lot of the behaviors from occurring to begin with, because the students are more engaged and they're better supported academically in the classroom, so the behaviors will be fewer. Going back to our conversation about multi-tier systems of supports, this is one of the core concepts that undergirds the code. We know our Tier 1 is for all students, promotion and prevention for all students. So those classroom practices, those are school-wide practices, those are going to be district-wide practices that are going to be put in place across the district for each and every student. There are going to be instances where students don't behave. I mean, it is developmentally appropriate for students not to behave sometimes. And we have to have ways to teach them better behavior. And so that's where Tier 2 comes in with interventions, which can be facilitated by teachers, specialists, administrators, so on and so forth. And your Tier 3 are for your intensive students that may not be responding to either one of the other tiers, which is a very small percentage of students that will fall into that category. The discipline and student support section is another very important section. It starts with defining discipline, promotion and enforcement of 5 district-wide rules. There are 5 rules that have been settled upon across our stakeholder groups for students to guide their conduct throughout the schools. And those rules are respecting each other's personal space, respecting and valuing everyone's individual and group dignity and identity, arriving on time, staying in class, having a pass and permission to travel in common areas, listening, acknowledging, and responding to directions and requests, and communicating respectfully and using school-appropriate language. So those 5 rules are what is going to be implemented across the district from school to school, so there's not different rules for different schools. As I stated before, students are going to misbehave, is to be expected, because they are students, they're young people, they're going to make mistakes. And so at some point, when a teacher writes a referral, that goes to a principal, administrator, dean, and the disciplinary response cycle begins. This is all outlined in the code. It's a set of school-wide standardized actions that will take effect when students misbehave or exhibit unskillful, inappropriate, or unacceptable behavior. And this is a support, these are supports beyond what the classroom teacher has already done. The code details the cycle in detail for administrators each step in the process, and it standardizes the cycle across the district, which increases equity for all students. Accountable consequences exist in the code, and those accountable consequences include up to and including out-of-school suspension, but also have other options for schools to select in addressing student misbehavior. Establishing predictable consequences helps students know what to expect when they engage in chronic behaviors that are seriously disruptive to the learning environment, if they engage in acts of aggression, violate someone's dignity, or jeopardize someone's physical, emotional, or social safety. What is a little different about this code is that there are restorative interventions also included with each consequence. And so how do we restore a student back to being whole again after they have after they've committed an infraction against a peer, or they've had some kind of conflict in the school, or they've disturbed the peace of the sanctity of the school community in some way? For every accountable consequence comes an aligned restorative intervention. And this is about having students learn new skills to avoid repeating the unwanted behavior again. And so these are some examples of restorative interventions that are included in the code. And I won't read those to you. You can see those there on your screen. And another piece that is missing from many codes is closing the loop. What happens when a student returns from out-of-school suspension? What happens when a student returns from ISS, or after they've had whatever consequence was selected? Closing the loop includes reentry conferences, communications with teachers, could be parent-teacher conference, some of the things that we do already, but the code will outline several other options that will assist with students, closing the loop for students as they are restored back to themselves and hopefully won't repeat the same behaviors again. The ultimate goal of the disciplinary response cycle is to help students become more skillful and exhibit these things that are on the screen, becoming more aware of the skills and behaviors that help them be successful, help self-regulate, help them to demonstrate empathy and respect, and to build civic responsibility. As stated earlier, the disciplinary response cycle helps to improve equity, increase equity by limiting discretionary decision-making by administrators and teachers, aligning accountable consequences with restorative interventions, and ensuring that there's consistent communication across stakeholder groups. There's support for all stakeholders in this new code, from parents, students, and staff knowing their rights on how to act on their responsibilities. It supports parents and caregivers to give help as needed, supports students to self-advocate and to follow district-wide rules, supports teachers to implement classroom strategies with skill and confidence to build their efficacy, supports student services staff in implementing restorative interventions, and supports administrators in standardizing disciplinary responses and leading the work of equity in their buildings. This graphic here shows the potential for the code as a gear among many gears in our school system, that if the code is moving in the right direction, all these other entities will move in the right direction along with it. And so with the implementation of the code, we hope that the movement toward progress that we would like to see and increased improve our outcomes begins. And so what are our next steps? As you've heard earlier, we want to enter a public comment period starting tomorrow. And there's a link that can be found at this website, www.sfcs.k12.nc.us/code. There's lots of information there about the code work. And there's a link there that people can give public comments on different sections of the code. There are going to be 3 community forums held on Monday. We're going to have a live one at East Forsyth High School. And concurrently at the same time, we're going to host a virtual option for families and individuals that may not be able to travel or may be more apt to get online and be able to participate that way. On May 23rd, we want to host a specific Spanish-speaking forum for some of our Hispanic Latino families that will be live streamed at Trinity Church on May 23rd. We're going to gather all the public comments and have some discussions amongst our team and bring back to the board to vote on the code on May 24th. And along with that, you can imagine this is a very heavy lift. The mindset shift was mentioned several times tonight. There's lots of professional development that has to occur along with this code to prepare teachers and administrators, students, families, community members, to implement the code with fidelity in the best interest of our students. And so we want to begin developing that professional development plan alongside our partner, Engaging Schools, that has been a great facilitator of this work. For us, that research base and the tools that they bring to the table have been just phenomenal and unheard of, quite honestly. And so with that being said, we'd like to recommend that the board approve the release of the code, and so that the public can have a public comment period, and we can get the draft posted on our website as soon as possible, sometime this evening, by the morning, as soon as we possibly can. So do you have any questions?
Board Member Bohannon?
Thank you. First, I want to thank you, Dr. Cato, and thank you, Dr. McMillan, for all of your hard work, as well as all of the members of the community who participated in the crafting of this code. I think that as a draft, where we are right now, I think it's pretty good. At our session last week, I think the board gave some feedback. Those revisions or shifts will be made, or changes will be made, and if we pass this, those revisions will still be made?
Yeah,
yes, sir.
Yes, so the feedback was all noted down. It does not reflect what will go up tomorrow because our team that is translating has been working on this document, which is pretty extensive and comprehensive. And so we didn't make any significant changes based on your feedback, but we have all of that feedback noted, and alongside all the other feedback we'll be going through all of that to make recommendations for changes before it comes on the 24th.
Okay, so you haven't made the changes yet. You're
Not on this document, no, because they started working on the translation that same day.
But they'll be incorporated as you kind of, before the final recommendation comes to us.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So while I have you, Dr. McMillan, you made mention of discretionary language, like decreasing the amount of discretionary language. Could you give an example of what discretionary language looks like?
Yeah, so things like that can be interpreted very differently based on, just can be interpreted differently. Like disruptive, disrespectful. To kind of give you a case in point, so I know this is far off of what might be happening in schools, but when I grew up, my mom and dad insisted that I say yes ma'am, no ma'am, yes sir, no sir, Mr. So-and-so, Miss So-and-so, right? And if I didn't do that, was considered disrespectful. When I raised my daughter, it was yes, no. I did instill Mr. or Mrs., but it wasn't viewed by me or someone else as, in my age group particularly, as being disrespectful. And so there's a lot of things that happen. Sometimes it's cultural norms are just different, and it's viewed as disrespectful when Others may not view it as disrespectful or aggressive behavior, or just some of that language that just can be left up to so much interpretation. And so really trying to clean that up so that it is more explicit, even though it doesn't remove all discretion out of the code, but to eliminate those places where we can, so it's more explicit.
Okay. And then lastly, Dr. Cato, on one of your slides where you talked about, I'm trying to remember it because it was a while ago, but it was basically there are a number of tools within the tool belt relative to corrective action. There was ISS, but then there was also teacher or administration or administrative detention. And I wanted to know what the difference between those two were. What's the difference between ISS and teacher or administrative detention?
What I imagine the difference is that it could be a period of time where there are some individuals that may have a relationship with the student or a certain skill set, and they may send a child to that particular person for them to cool down. It could be part of their individualized plan, or, you know, some people just have that whisperer effect. That's what I imagine that intervention entailed. That happens informally anyway in some schools, where you send a kid to a certain, I'm thinking middle school in particular, where you send a kid to a certain teacher's classroom on that team because they just have a certain way with the kids instead of sending them to the office. It would be that sort of a setup, but just more codified and more part of the actual process as opposed to something informal.
Okay, thank you.
Any more? Board Member Motzinger.
So thank you for bringing that. And again, I look forward to the things that the board asked for it to be in the final document that comes before us. I think it's really important to know that this process is to benefit individual students, but on a broader level to change the climate in our schools so that the schools themselves feel warm, welcoming, and restorative. I think it's also important for people to understand that there are indeed consequences in here, and that there is behavior that is truly not acceptable to happen in our buildings, because I think sometimes people get scared that that will all go away. And it's important that the community know that there are going to be clear consequences for dangerous or really bad behavior to other students or to adults, but that this is indeed a way of trying to help children learn how to be in community together. And if that is effective, that makes our schools better overall. So I think that's a really important thing for people to understand. Again, I personally want one of our closing the loops, as long as we have a virtual option, to eliminate expulsions from our district so that students who are not safe to be in the building for any set of reasons are not going to have their education stopped by our district. And I would really like that to be part of the language, because I don't think any of us want to be the cause for why a child can't finish their education. But we also all understand that there are times for the safety of the community that have to be removed.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Any other? Okay. Board
And
Member
I would
Crowley?
like that to be in writing in the code, please.
Yes, ma'am.
I got it written down.
So we've talked a lot about the perpetrator of poor decisions. How about the students or teachers on the receiving end? What are we doing to restore them? We, as board members, we hear a lot on grievance panels of students who want to be moved from a school because of incidents that happen, especially incidents of violence. And I think that's part of I don't see how a perpetrator of this can be restored without making some kind of amends with who they've offended.
I can speak to that. Yes, I'm a trainer for restorative practices, so yes. So, you know, as our intent, and as we get feedback too, there's a section in there for rights and responsibilities even for staff. And I do wholeheartedly believe that when there has been harm caused to a teacher, I was a classroom teacher for a very, very long time. that restoration also needs to happen in that case. And so with that process, it is about, we have the list of questions too, how you be in conversation and be restorative to individuals separately. So the person who actually caused the harm, that there's accountability there, but giving them space to talk about so they can really understand and process how their action or behavior impacted someone else. So that's true. That's a part of the process that people oftentimes don't realize, that if I cause harm, I need to understand the harm that I caused and the impact that it had on someone else. That also needs to happen on the other side with adults, for them to process the harm that happened to them. Now, it is great when the two parties can come together and make amends. That doesn't always happen. That's just reality, whether I'm in a school building or outside of a school building. But for both individuals, one of the final questions that is asked is what needs to happen to make things right. So there's accountability for the person who caused the harm, of things that they're going to commit to and do, whether that is a formal apology, whether it's whatever it is. And on the other side, the person who was harmed, what needs to happen to make things right. So they can also say, here is what I need to be okay in this building. And being able to talk through that is really, really important to do that. And I know through our SEL and Restorative Practices Department, and they're talking about, they have consistently talked about the adult SEL is just as important as the students in our buildings. And so the work has to happen hand in hand on both, for both groups. Because adults, we've got to be there to support our kids, and we've got to be in a good place to do that. And we also want our kids to be in a good place to be able to show up every day and be in an environment where they also feel welcomed and supported too. So it's a great question.
Board Member Jones?
I just, looking at the timeline, and my laptop just, okay. So looking at the timeline, you know, I'm just looking, if we're trying to do the public comments and things are going to come out of that from the 6th, like, you know, we have 11th through the 18th and the 16th, and then we have the last one on the 23rd, but yet it's going to come to the board the very next day. I don't think that that's realistic. Like, I'm hoping that I can see something that talks, so we've done a deep dive on the code, the document as it looks now, and then if there's true feedback and we're going to make adjustments to that, the public's going to see something that is not even going to be reflective of what the board's input was. So we're putting something out that doesn't have our input into it. So I kind of have pause on that. And then I have pause that we're putting this together, and then we're going to look at it, and then we're expected to vote on it. And I can't process all of that, and you know, because there's no way. I mean, basically, in order for this document to be in our packet for us to look at on our normal timeline of when we get things, if you attended the 23rd meeting, your feedback wouldn't even be included. So I think that's too rushed. I think we're going to have to push that back into June at least, so that we could see a draft. We can, and I would really like to see us talk through that. So if there are changes made, we see what we saw the other day, and then, you know, the comments from the public, and then why we made those adjustments, and then let us kind of vet that out a little bit. Because I mean, I think this is, if we're really trying to make changes, because I would look at this timeline and I would think, do they really want my input, and is it really going to be in there? And then as a board member, I can't. There's just no way I can process all of that and be expected to vote on it in that timeline. And again, you know, normally I don't have the calendar pulled up, but normally we would receive those things like on the Wednesday or Thursday before the Tuesday, and so that would cut out the whole 23rd. May 23rd meeting would be gone.
Board Member Parker?
Yeah. That was a concern of mine as well. And obviously, as board members, I mean, there's two of the public comment times that are at the same time. So, I mean, obviously, we can't be there. So I was just wondering what kind of, how are you going to relay input to us as board members that happened at these community meetings because, I mean, as board members, I think we need to know what those comments are, like how frequently, like, 10 people said, about this area of the code of conduct. I mean, I'm just wondering what kind of, how that will be relayed to us as board members.
Exactly how you just described it, Ms. Parker. We have a meeting set up shortly thereafter the end of the online public comment period to kind of sit down and process that information. We would do the same after the Spanish-speaking forum and kind of add in those additional pieces. But to your point, I mean, it's a very good point about the timeline, Ms. Jones. It's a very good point. But we do have a process in place for you guys to get that feedback.
So let me jump in here. So our team, if we were to bring, so our first board meeting, I know we have lots of implementation plans then after, once this gets approved in final form, our movement for training. The board meeting after the May 24th one, if we did indeed want to come back and give the board the time they need to look at it before they vote, would we be pushing back too far with a June 14th? That's the next board meeting, when we think of our implementation plan.
I don't think so. I don't
Okay.
think that's too much to ask.
So I think that would give you time to take all the input from all the different groups, make the changes, and then give the board at least a week to look at it before the meeting?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay.
And I'm also concerned about the limited opportunities for community forums and, just, I think it's really important that we have them in all different parts of the county.
I think the reason there are probably 3, and I'm speaking for the team, is time, and you just saw them trying to squeeze those
Yeah,
in.
and this is
before-
too
yeah.
big to have
Right,
a very
so-
limited
so-
public
Mhm.
feedback.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can
Maybe-
definitely add more sessions
this
if
now with
we
the timing.
push the timeline
Yeah.
back. We can definitely add more sessions.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, that we get a couple more and then compile it all. Okay.
Okay, any more
Thank you.
questions?
I think it's just important to note that there definitely will be people who will come to these community sessions, but I think we need to be reminded that many times once a document is on the agenda for action, that's a whole nother public comment section. And so, and those comments most of the time are in our inbox of the board. And so we need to be able to go through, and I think that's the reason for that vetting piece. As long, the sooner that we can see what that looks like with that backup, then it helps when a lot of times, for some reason, it's just not on parents' radars or staff's radars, and then they want to be able to weigh in, and we need to be able to hear, from them. So consideration to try to, again, move that to June and at that May 24th meeting, if staff can then bring, if we can have it by then, if we can highlight or talk about some of the reasons why things were changed, that's not bad. I mean, this is, as Board Member Crowley said, this is a big investment. It's been a lot of time invested by people in the community, been working on it for a year. So I'd hate to see we get right to the end and we kind of move quickly, and in our haste, we miss something.
Good point. Anybody else? Okay. Next discussion item.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Kevin Sherrill and Jonathan Wilson will present the software service subscription.
Good evening, Chair Kaplan and board members and Superintendent McManus. Hope everyone's doing well. I know the hour's getting late, so I will do my best to move us and close us out here on discussion items. Come before you tonight with an opportunity that's before us for your consideration and discussion regarding the implementation. Obviously, I can't talk and click at the same time. Give me a moment here. The implementation of a digital platform to monitor the well-being of our students and student safety. So I just want to kind of share this with you. This is a partnership with the technology department and our security department headed by Jonathan Wilson, and he's going to speak a little bit about how we're going to handle some of the process on this if we elect to go forward with it. But This year, our State Department, out of their state ESSER 3 combined reserves, not the money that was allocated to our district, but state money, they established a PRC, a Program Report Code 192, specifically for this program, and allocated, if you applied, allocated dollars to districts, and I did apply, and we were allocated $558,000 specifically for this platform. And the purpose, as you see there, is to mitigate cyberbullying, monitor student internet activity, not filter internet activity. We do that internally, but to monitor what kids are doing online, and to monitor and manage classroom educational devices. So that's the core of what the funding is for, and it's allocated to all LEAs across the districts if they elect to do so. If we choose not to do so, then this money just reverts back to the state. So what we did at that point was we put an official RFP out there to look at all the products and the vendors that provide this type of service. And there are about 7 or 8 out there across the nation that do this. And we completed an RFP, and we've chosen a vendor, but we're not going to go into the platform tonight. This is more just discussion about what it looks like as we go forward for a vote later in the month. We'll share our awarded vendor. But there are really 2 core components. The first is the student monitoring and alerts. And I won't read each of these bullets, but basically, to summarize what it does on the student safety monitoring, it looks at everything the student is doing on the Chromebook that they are using or the iPad that they are using that the district has issued them. The software works in a sense that it has an extension or an agent embedded on the software of the Chromebook or the iPad that allows the platform to capture any web activity that they do. So any Google search, it works against a keyword of seven different categories it looks at, such as cyberbullying, violence, self-harm, and we have complete control of these categories as far as what things we want, what keywords we want it to look for. So it looks at the student's device, not only the websites that they go to, but also a Google search that may relate to something about violence against another student, or something even larger about something they want to do against the school or to themselves. And there's an algorithm that runs in the software that sends an alert at that point that would go to Jonathan's team to decide whether that's something that needs to be acted on and involve school-based folks. So it looks at their email. Our Office 365 email looks at what they're doing in their email. It looks at anything on the Chromebook that they're using. It looks at their Google Docs, anything in the G Suite. What it does not do is we're not looking at their personal devices. Even if they're running on our network, which we do allow students to use their personal devices on our public network, we're not monitoring anyone's personal devices. We're not monitoring anything they do in Snapchat or Instagram and all the things that the kids use, but we are looking at what they are doing on our devices. And that also includes when they have it at home. It does not matter what connection they are using. It matters that they're using our device. Okay? Let me stop there for any questions about that piece of it. That's the technical piece of it.
Board Member Bramer?
Yes, ma'am.
I have a couple. So you're definitely not going to be going through cellular. You're just going through Wi-Fi and on our devices alone.
It does not matter which internet connection they use. It could be their LTE if they connect to that with their hotspot at home, or their Wi-Fi at their house, or definitely our networks in our buildings. It does not matter the internet connection. It just matters the device. It's device specific.
And it's word algorithms, but are you checking embedded images?
It does search for images. It does have what they call a flesh tone feature if we intend to use that piece. This is not to catch kids in things that kids do to be kids, right? We're looking for kids that want to harm themselves, suicide prevention, bullying other children. How do I make a bomb to blow up the school? Things like that. Those type of level of things are what this platform is designed to do. And so we're not looking at curse words and new kids and all those things. We don't have the capacity to go to that granular level, and that's not what it's about.
One of the things I'm asking about is, I know a lot of people use memes now. They'll take a picture and they'll type it into the picture, but it's not really text. It becomes a part of the image. So are you scanning the image for the same words as you would scan any kind of text?
Yes, we picked this particular product, the one we landed on, because it does have an image scanning technology built into this platform.
That's what I wanted to check on. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Board Member Bohannon?
Is this a piece of software that has to be manually installed on every Chromebook?
No, sir. This is a cloud-based platform, And we will, through our Google Management Console and our Intune Management Console, which manages our iPads, we'll be able to push out the agent or the extension that runs on the devices. So it's a really lightweight extension that will be pushed out automatically without any installation of that matter.
Okay, and so to go back to the question about you can be at your home Wi-Fi, on your home Wi-Fi, and still have that device be subject to this. I think as I'm sort of processing it, because it is our device, we can, because I think when you talk about doing that when people are at home, I think that gave me a little bit of pause, but I think that it's our device, so at the end of the day, we can, you know, did you all talk through that at all?
Well, absolutely we did, and Dion and I discussed this today with Jonathan about, you know, the hardware is our hardware, and that we are not invading their privacy by managing the hardware that we give the students. So the connection doesn't really matter here, in my opinion. We are just monitoring what is happening on that device, and we filter the internet, we filter their connection, not at their home, we filter their device anyway. So when a student's at home on their Chromebook and they go onto the internet through their Wi-Fi at their house, it still routes back to our data center to be filtered for content filtering, not monitoring, but content filtering, which are two different things really. So we're already doing that on a daily basis because we're required to by SIPA, Child Internet Protection Act. It requires us to do that to maintain our E-rate funding. So this is really just another level of that, where we're already filtering the device, no matter the internet connection. Now we're asking to implement a platform that will monitor the activity on the devices based on protecting our kids from self-harm and suicide and cyberbullying.
So even when a child goes home and they use their Chromebook on their home Wi-Fi, there's still limitations on the websites that they can go to at home.
It's the same as if they were sitting in school. It's the same filter policy they get at home that they get at school.
Okay, thank you.
And Board Member Montzinger and I were talking about this during the agenda review, and she had a really good point about making sure that they know that that they are being monitored. You know, maybe a screenshot in the very beginning, something like that, just to keep that in the forefront.
Yeah, absolutely. We can communicate it however we see fit, but I think it's important to say that, you know, I've got children that are in teenage years and in middle school, and they use other things. This is not going to be a catch-all product, but it is going to give us some security that when a student is using our device, that we do have at least some insight into what might be going on with that student to protect their mental health and their physical well-being. Can we look at their phones? Can we look at Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, all these things? No, we can't do that, and we're not trying to do that. Right. But it does give us one more layer of support for our students.
And you have that opt-in option. Are you going to talk about that next, about parents?
Yeah, I'll get absolutely. I'll get to that.
Can I ask a question first?
Yes.
So, do you have any data from schools using this program to show that it has made their schools or their students safer?
I don't have the data tonight to share with you, but I've seen the data, and I've seen real-life cases of how it's been implemented and some cases of where it saved a child's life because of an incident that was going to happen that they got in front of. So I do have case studies and things like that I could bring back to you as we go through this discussion period over the next month or two, or however long it takes for us to make a decision.
And another question I have is how are we going to differentiate, a high schooler researching depression or school violence or that type of thing, and then that end up being a trigger for them to, be investigated?
Yeah, and I asked a lot of those same questions. They were looking at this, and it doesn't only look at just one word. The word kill could be in To Kill a Mockingbird, right, on a Google search. It looks at the string of text, and the software works in a manner that it makes relations of words that are in a string of text. But, Jonathan and I were talking this morning that, kids use different words that mean different things these days too, right? I think your example was, I'm going to spit on the school today. That might mean I'm going to shoot at the school today. So there's going to be some false positives that we're going to have to deal with through this. And as we get into it, I think, Jonathan, you want to come up and talk about how we're going to handle the alerts. It's going to be something we're just kind of have to evolve and just see how it goes on some of those pieces.
Just to remind you, I know you guys know, but we're already using Bully Patrol. We've used that for many years. We're now using the Say Something anonymous reporting system, and those systems have been. I was not really a believer to begin with, but I've seen the amount of tips that come in and the things that we're seeing and stopping from happening. with those tips that come in each and every day. But each one of those two things are dependent on somebody giving us that tip. And so this gives us another way, just when a child is on our device, if they do something concerning, that we do see that. So it would come, the way I see this working, it would come to my team, and we would put some human eyes on it. Not only is Kevin understands this better than I do, but not only is the computer looking to see that string of words, but then we're going to put some human eyes on it to see what context it was in, and is it something that's actionable and something that we need to take action on, and if so, then we can forward it to the correct person who can take that action and resolve it and make sure the child gets the help, or we intervene in some way to stop something from happening.
Board Member Jones?
I just, I mean, I understand the piece that says, you know, if a student is struggling, right, some self-harm, and that's would be great. It just seems to me that we're taking a big leap into their own personal, you know, privacy to a point. But I also, Ms. Motzinger already has the microphone pulled up, but giving you a hard time, friend. But you know, I think we're talking about, so students, and I think this is kind of where I'm going to, is students who are dependent upon our devices will have them pushed on them. But if I don't need the school device, it doesn't apply to me. So, you know, are we really deep diving and monitoring these kids, and then these folks over here that have their own iPad, their own this, their own, we're not monitoring it. I mean, we're even doing that while they're home. I don't know. We have so many big brothers already, and we also are talking about how we try to teach. We just talked about code of conduct, and we're trying to, so how do we help young people guide in themselves, but yet we are, you know, really in their business. And then to Aaliyah's point, what would that look like? I mean, I'm just concerned about what really are those safety measures in there. And if I'm researching, I'm doing something, and then all of a sudden something gets flagged, how is that handled? And then as a student, how do I feel that I've been identified in that way? I don't really know I'm sure we'll learn all that and what that looks like, but to me, it seems like it's a pretty deep dive into their personal world. As a student, I kind of like Ms. Motzinger's point, or what Chair Kaplan said. If I'm logging on, flash up and remind me. Pretty much, Big Brother's watching everything you're doing on this device. So just know it every single time that you log on.
Right. Board Member Woodbury? Oh, Board Member Motzinger, sorry.
I do want to reiterate, you know, when I was a PA working with a lot of teenagers, I would tell them up front, you can tell me anything and it's confidential, except if you tell me these things, I'm required to report them. And that was a way of communicating to somebody, because what I didn't want to do is say to somebody, you can tell me anything, it's confidential, and then turn around and say to them, accept that. I always gave them a heads up. So I think it's really important as just a reminder, this is being monitored. I certainly agree very much that as a society we have, I mean, it terrifies me to imagine that we have children who have been under camera surveillance literally from the day they were born, and that we are continuing to do that. So I would hope, you know, that's a whole big complicated topic about how do we restore childhood to our children and get them outside and give them opportunities to just play. There's so much there. But I do think that if we're going to do something like this, it has to be a reminder that you're, in the same way that I, as an elected official, have an iPad where my school system email comes through and I don't confuse it with my personal devices, because I am aware of, as an elected official, there are things that are open for the public. So I just want to make sure that we do that. I do agree that there is a discrepancy between children who are dependent entirely on what we give them. However, they also do have a private and personal life that we don't have access to and should not have access to, and that ideally, none of us think that we're conducting our whole life online. That is a terrible way to live. So it should be your work is being done online, but your life should be being lived in real life.
Board Member Woodbury?
Thank you, Chairwoman Kaplan. I just wanted to make sure that I'm clear, Kevin, that only our devices would have this student monitoring and alerts, not their personal device.
Absolute.
Okay.
That's absolute. Yes.
I would probably ask Dion or our general counsel what other school districts do as general best practice around when it's our device owned by the school system. How do we make sure that we are, not held liable for things done on the device? And to, Board Member Jones' point, not trying to, be maybe making sure we don't cross the line to evade their privacy. But I think we just need to be clear that if the device is ours, there may be a liability factor that is sort of where a lot of school districts, try to cover themselves.
Board Member Parker? Oh, okay.
I would just say that according to your policy 6161, responsible use of technology, there is language in there that states and clarifies that anyone using our device, students or employees, don't have an expectation of privacy when using those devices, and that the board reserves the right to monitor any and all communications that are sent or received on those devices. So I did just want to make you aware of that. But in regards to what other districts do, I know there are some districts that use software either the same or similar to this, and I would have to explore that a little further, and I'm happy to do that between now and the next time this comes to the board for discussion. Yes.
I would like to clarify that the board is not reviewing people's.
Correct. Correct.
And that we have really no interest in reading your email. I just want to be on record.
Yes, that's correct.
So I just kind of would like to know the process. Let's say that you have a device that something pops up on, maybe suicide. Let's just take that one as an example, that a child uses words that that may mean that they're considering suicide. What's the process? And I guess I'm more concerned about at what point are the parents a part of that process, or
Well, we've got to develop that if we decide to go forward, but essentially the way it would work, we would assign a severity level to those types of things. So let's say it's suicide. We would rank that in a severity level of 1 to 5 based on what it is, and would have whatever that severity level is would then engage the process, which is something like that would go to Jonathan's team, and then Jonathan's team would decide whether, what school-based team needs to be engaged, and then of course to the parents. So it's all going to be dependent upon the severity level that we place on the keywords or the key phrases that it may trigger as an alert. Now, the students aren't going to get a pop-up that, hey, you've been flagged or anything like that. They're not going to see anything. It's the service is going to send an alert to Jonathan's team, and there may be a lot of different things in there that they would have to look at and make a determination whether that's something that needs to be acted upon.
okay, and you as the process is developed, if we go forth with this, you all will be aware of that process, because I can see that we need to be aware of that process, because we may hear about that process from time to time.
I would say we would develop it, then come back and even mock it up and demonstrate it, how it works before we go forward. Probably the best thing to do. But I'll say this, this is a tough one. This is why this is a discussion item, right? I think it's my job and my due diligence to bring a $500,000 opportunity to us that is no cost to our district that the state's providing, to see if it makes sense for our district for the things that it does. There is another component that it does that has an instructional value that I'll get to in just a quick moment. But so I don't want you to think that the technology, the CTOs up here saying we've got to have this. This is something that I think you can, as Board Member Jones mentioned, there's two sides of this argument probably. I mean, if a student uses a Google Doc and types up their suicide note, and we could have known about that, I would think we would have known about that. And this would let us know that. And if we haven't, and then it was, it's publicized that, hey, well, they typed that on their G drive, why didn't y'all know, right? And that'd be a question we might get asked, because the whole state knows that these platforms are available for districts to purchase. So there's that side of the argument as well. And then there's the whole, Deanna and I have talked extensively about the liability to the district about acting or not acting in those things. So this is a very tough decision, in my opinion, but it's one I think that as a leadership team and as a board that we can make the best decision for our district. And if it's leave the money on the table and walk away from it, that's fine by me. I just want to make sure that everyone understands what we have an opportunity to do.
So when you say leave the money on the table, I'm confused. Is this something that has a grant?
It's a grant from the state allocated specifically for this process, for this product. And if we choose not to do it, then it reverts back.
How long is this covered? So is there sustainability on here? Is this
That's
sort
a good
of
question.
So to me, I always get, once you do something, that becomes your new norm. And that would concern me, that if it's being offered, this is on the table, but we're talking about $500,000, is that for a year?
It's on the first slide, but I'll revisit it.
Sorry.
It's for 2 years. It's a 2-year subscription. This funding will carry us for 2 years.
So we would
And at
do
that
something
point-
for 2 years, and then we would not have the resources,
Or-
or we would have to decide that that was a top priority.
Or as I've seen in the past, the state will extend additional funding to
Right.
continue it for us, which they've done with other programs. So, but after 2 years, that is a question mark right now that we would have to figure out. Either it's, it's a slam dunk, we got to keep this, and we figure out how to find $250 a year to continue it, or the state continues to provide us money, or we say, well, that was a good trial for 2 years, and we're not going to continue it. So there's a question mark there as well.
I would say my biggest concern is that surveillance never gets back down on. It tends to get added on, and then, so for example, we're not likely to look at the 100 cameras in a high school and say, we really only need 50 of these. Let's go down to 10. So my concern is very much that we are living in an increasingly surveillance society, and that there is great consequence to that is not always immediately apparent, but is of a great consequence. And I guess when I think of myself as a teenager, if I were very vulnerable and I knew something was being monitored, I sure would not write my suicide note on a Google Doc. I would go find a piece of paper in my house.
Now-
And that concerns me so much, that if we're alerting people enough, then, and again, my biggest concern is that as a society, every single thing we do in the name of safety becomes the new normal and then gets added to. And I think that, I find that personally very worrisome.
Well, I think your point's a good one. And I actually asked that question to some of these vendors, and I actually talked to my colleagues around the state, that if you tell the kids that we're doing this, they're just not going to use it. And they say, absolutely not. The kids continue to put stuff in there that you wouldn't even believe that they're putting in their email and their Google Docs and their OneDrive. So that was the feedback I got from other districts, that even though they're told and they know they're being monitoring, kids are doing kid things, and they continue to do it. So obviously, we haven't implemented here, so I can't say that's happened here, but that has happened in districts around us.
Board Member Bramer?
I have one final question up for me. Have you load tested this to see just how much it might add to your load of data?
We've not done any of that other than say, here's $500,000 and here's a product that does this, and for discussion with the board. We've not taken it into any type of technical, it's not going to be any strain on our network because it's cloud hosted. We're not going to own it. It's not going to sit in our data center. But the data sets coming in that Jonathan's team may need to look at, it's hard to say. It's going to depend on how we configure those thresholds that I mentioned. So I'm going to touch on 2 other quick pieces of it, and then we'll just talk about some next steps. So from an instructional side, there is another component of this platform that allows teachers in the instructional setting in the classroom to have full visibility of what their kids are doing on their Chromebooks. They'll have a dashboard on their laptop let's say the students are working on a lesson in Canvas, and the teacher expects all of them to be in the Canvas lesson, and little Darrell Walker's out there on NBA.com looking up the playoffs, then the teacher will be able to see that and also be able to lock their screen into what they want to do. So they'll have some granular control of what's going on in the screens in their classroom. So that's a little different than the safety monitoring. It just gives the teacher another instructional tool. Now, obviously, we want teachers up, moving, and walking around and interacting with kids. But when the students are using their devices in the classroom, this platform also gives an opportunity for teachers to manage those screens a little more.
I just want to say, in training teachers, of course, over in Guilford County Schools with this platform, it was the #1 favorite tool of teachers to be able to control children devices while they were teaching. They would just move around with the device to make sure that students were. So I do think that before we make a final decision, maybe to get some feedback from teachers around this tool to monitor.
They definitely want this because they wear my email out about it. So now we could, Board Member Jones just mentioned, we could, if we implement the program, we could roll out this piece of it and do a pilot of the other and study it over the first 6 months of the implementation and then kind of see what the data sets look like and see what the response is and kind of ease into it. We could think of it that way as well. As you're thinking about this over the next month, as we come back at the end of the month to talk about it more, we could talk about that.
Board Member Crowley.
Yeah, would this software be monitoring teachers' devices?
No, absolutely, no
Okay.
teacher monitoring. The final piece that comes with, those are the two core component pieces, safety monitoring and device management, but there's also a parent portal that the parents will have access to that allows them to go in and learn about cybersecurity, learn about, some parents don't know what Snapchat is, so they'll be able to go out there and look at videos and how-tos about what is TikTok, what is Snapchat, what are all these things that our students are using. So really, did they have just a strong parent resource? There's an app review piece that looks at all the apps that students are loading on their phones and gives parents some insight on what that app is, what it does, what's the risk level. So it's really just a parent community piece for parents to go and be more educated about what the kids are using on their devices.
Any more questions?
So my current next step, I'm sorry,
Oh,
Chair
I'm
Kaplan,
sorry.
I cut you off.
I'm sorry.
My current next steps were to come back and look for approval on the 24th, but I feel like we might need more time than that. The only time-sensitive piece of this, and Dr. Hales is here with me, is that the funds have to be expended by September 30th of 2024. So we've got a little over a 2-year window of using these funds on a monthly subscription. So if we go into August, September, October, then that 2 years is going to shrink because we've got to expend the funds during the life of the grant, which is September of 24. So that was my hope, was to implement over the summer, roll it out August. We have a good solid 2 years of using this, but I guess I would just encourage us all just to think about it, and maybe we can come back next board meeting for maybe more discussion. I feel like based on what we've said tonight that we're probably not ready for a vote on the 24th, unless you guys think that you can. Maybe we need to.
I'd still like to see data from other districts
that'd be
about
good.
how much it does, how many instances it does prevent.
Some true case data.
Yes.
I would too.
I can bring that back.
And then, if we can roll out so if I'm in the classroom, which my expectation is that I'm supposed to be on task doing the lesson that we're doing. So, what would that look like? Is that something that could roll out and then?
Yeah, the classroom management piece is tied to Power School. So if you're a student in Mr. Wilson's class and you log in with DC Jones,
Right.
As soon as you log in, your Chromebook screen is going to pop up because it's auto-rostered behind the scenes in Power School. So that piece, the instructional management piece is, that's
But
something
that
easier.
still
to implement.
doesn't keep me off my
It does not keep you
phone.
off your iPhone on
Or
your LTE connection.
whatever else I have.
Unfiltered. I mean, there's just things that, there's things that kids are doing on their personal devices that we are not ever going to be privy to, and we're not trying to be, and those things are happening.
I think maybe on, if we want to talk about it again on the 24th, and we have spent a great deal of time talking about social emotional learning and many things like that. So, I don't know, how does that make, if we're telling our students that and I do believe that Ms. Motsinger brings a point, I would like to see that like every time somebody logs in, they're reminded it's being monitored, you're being monitored. But then I mean, can we talk to the experts that we have about how is that going to make our students feel? I think there's something to that. I think as adults, we almost feel that way a little. I mean, but I'm not the parent who tracked my child and did all, like because I don't want to be done that way. I don't know. I think there's a sense of personal space and just responsibility. So I would be interested, the data that Aaliyah's talking about, but then also to those who help us when we were talking about trying to help our students. What does that I'm constantly being monitored do to you?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think every parent will probably have different opinions about that. And I'll just share mine. I've got an 8th grader, and if he was typing in a Google Doc that he was depressed and wanted to hurt himself, I would love for someone to call and tell me that. As a parent, I would want to know that. But other parents may see that differently, so I think you go have different opinions.
I mean, you went right to, I think every parent would say, if I thought my child was suicidal, if there was a problem, we would all, in hindsight, want to know that. I think, but some of the other thing is just the constant monitor. I think we would all agree to that. But I think just the constant monitoring of everything, what message does, we're talking about we want our students to belong and feel like school's a place they want to belong to. And all I'm saying is, if I feel like everything connected to that, and the whole time I'm there, I'm being watched and monitored through a device, is there any, how does that make you feel? I think adults say that, right? We hear studies about places that people want to work and that they don't want to work, and sometimes it comes back because the corporation is constantly monitoring everything they're doing, and there's, it's a very poor culture. So I get the safety piece of it, but at the same time, we're trying to build culture within our kids. And I'm not the expert to know that, but I'm just trying to figure out, would there be some correlation to that?
Right. Kevin, I have an idea. Why don't we pull together a high school student focus group and talk to them about it?
And let me clarify one last thing, is that we're not monitoring everything they do.
Right. No one has time for that.
No, the point is this. If you type in NFL playoff scores, we're never going to see that. So we're not monitoring everything they do. We're only going to monitor things that trigger and alerts what gets monitored. I'll never see any of that traffic that they're doing that's outside of these thresholds. We're not monitoring any of that. So that
It's going somewhere.
it's not going through the system unless it's one of those key words or those key phrases.
There's an algorithm, there's something that's out there that all of their stuff is being watched. It is being monitored. You're just not going to be alerted to it unless it's within the algorithm.
Unless it hits one of the keywords in the threshold. Yes.
Which a computer, like a program's like a human being's not sitting there monitoring, but it's
Absolutely not.
it's a
But it's a
formula. Yeah.
In addition to the content filtering that we're already doing,
Yeah, I think, you know what, I think we bring the data back about what districts are using it, how helpful has it been, maybe meet with a group of students, get their feedback on it, and come back on the 24th and share all that.
Can you get some middle school students too?
Sure.
Because I think that maybe those kids I just think the middle school students are the ones that we're going to see more pop-ups from, just because they're middle schoolers.
I agree with that.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Next order of business is action items. First, consider approval of the contract with Krosnor Schools and Children's Homes. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve?
Second? Any discussion? All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Next, consider approval of public comment on student code of character, conduct, and support. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Next, consider approval of the 2022-2023 proposed budget recommendation. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve?
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. Next, consider approval of the disposition of surplus property. It's a vehicle. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve?
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? That's unanimous. Next, consider approval of Main Street Academy roof replacement. Do I have a motion?
Move
So-
approval.
Second.
Second, okay. Any discussion? All in favor? That's unanimous. Next, consider approval of application and conveyance for Easton Water Line.
Move
Do I-
to approve.
Okay, second.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? It's unanimous. Next, consider approval of Education Resource Group Title I contract. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? That's unanimous. Next, consider approval of the ESSER Indoor Air Quality Project bids for Bolton Elementary and Jefferson Middle. Do I have a
Move to
motion?
approve.
Okay, second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? That's unanimous. Okay. Next, announcements. Our next, Tuesday, May 24th, 2022, will be our next regular meeting of the Board of Education. We have no comments for the public tonight, so this concludes tonight's meeting. Thank you for being with us, and please check our website for a complete list of upcoming committee and other public meetings. Good night. Safe travels home. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on your school channel, Cable 2.